Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Gnostic Studies. And this evening we'd like to continue to study the Kabbalah with the Hermetic Masonry series. Drop some links in the comments area. So before we jump into today's topic, we want to, let's just look at this first part, right? So we're studying Hermetic Masonry. This is the first part. Still working on the second part. But it's a whole series, which is about Initiatic symbolism, which we'll see is related with Kabbalah and alchemy and psychology. The purpose of this class, and in fact the whole series, is to review the fundamental concepts of Gnostic Kabbalah that were given in the Tarot and Kabbalah and the Gnostic tradition class. So what did we cover? We covered the 3 introductions, 22 Arcana, and then 2 final classes. One of them about the Tetragrammaton, and one of them about the minor Arcana and the relationship to the Tetragrammaton. This series, the Hermetic Masonry series, could also be called Combinations of the Arcana, or it could be called the Mystery Religions of the Ancients, 2. The mysteries and their symbolism. Mystery Religions of the Ancients is another class that we have that talks about mystery religions, symbolism, creation, similarities. Talks a little bit about Freemasonry, Egyptian religion, Christianity, and then we try and tie it all together at the end. So when we talk about the mystery religions of the ancients, when we talk about Freemasonry in the 4th class, this is a supplemental handout that we have where we see that the Hebrew letters correspond to a number, and then there's esoteric letters as well, or alphabets, which have their name. And then in some French documents we found other correspondences, which we could say are similar to the correspondences that we discussed in our class. At the end of the class, we covered the last 2, Shin and Tav, the last 2 letters, and those are the same ones we're going to cover today, if we can get there. That's the goal, at least. When we begin in the first class of the combination of Arcana, working on. So when we talk about Arcana, what we're talking about is a letter, which corresponds to a number, which has its hieroglyphic symbolism, which is the tarot card, which is a visual mnemonic for remembering the symbols associated with that number. So again, we'll look at that more in just a little bit, but we just want to jump into today's material. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comments area. We're going to be building off the Kabbalistic studies of the Hebrew letters, since this will allow us to understand a number of symbolic representations. If one studies Masonry with a Gnostic approach, then it becomes quite clear that it is Kabbalistic and alchemical in its symbolism. The purpose of this course is to emphasize this and to give it definite explanation. We'll begin by studying the combination of Hebrew letters or combination of Arcana, and we will also include quotations directly from Masonic sources, and then we'll look at the so-called occult Masonry of Viracocha and Samaelo and Veor. What are they referring to? As well as additional combinations of arcana. Finally, we'll delve into how one acquires degrees internally, not externally. We're not talking about physical masonry in the traditional sense. We're talking about the internal masonry. And so how we'll learn about how we acquire degrees internally and how we pass ordeals of initiation, which is summarized in a statement that says, temptation is fire, but triumph over temptation is light. Clearly, this is going to be related with Arcanum 15 and Arcanum 21. So we'll try to briefly explain the esoteric process that we're going to be covering in detail in the classes below, but first we want to look at two books that we're going to be studying from. The one we've already been using for the Tarot and Kabbalah and the Gnostic tradition series, the Initiatic Path and the Arcana of Tarot and Kabbalah by Samaelo and Veor, and then the Gnostic and Esoteric Mysteries of Freemasonry, Lucifer, and the Great Work. That a lot of the material that we have comes from there. The book is sort of a compilation from our friends at Gnosis Publishing about similar subjects, and we'll see what their overlap is. Other books, and we try and cite them all, so that you can go to the primary sources if that interests you. But the other books that we'll be looking at will be from Eliphas Levi, Viracocha, that's Arnaldo Krimheller is his other name, and Samaelo and Veor. But these two are the primary ones. So, just checking if you guys have any questions or comments. All right. Understanding the Gnostic perspective on the Great Work. Gnosis shows us that there are definite steps or stages of the path to return to the Absolute. The Absolute is like the unity of everything. In order to understand them better, let's look at what Samaelo and Veor says in regards to the path. In chapter 13 of Treatise of Sexual Alchemy, he says, if we wish to create our interior universe, then we must create as God did when he created the universe. And that's, of course, why in the Mystery Religions class we look at the creation myths in different religions. In our courses on Gnostic Kabbalah, we've seen that the way divinity creates from top down, which is this graphic over here on the left, top down, in the Sephirothic tree. So it starts at Keter, Chokmah, Binah, Chesed, Geburah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malkut. This is a representation of the Absolute up here. So now we want to look at, so God created the universe, and we're a piece of that, or a part of that, right? Now we want to look at how the human being needs to create through the same tree, the same Sephirothic tree. We need to create our interior universe. In order to do that, we go bottom up. We start from the physical world. We start from our physical body. We move from Malkut to Yesod, Yesod to Hod, Hod to Netzach, Netzach to Tiferet, Tiferet to Geburah, Geburah to Chesed, Chesed to Binah, Binah, Chokmah, Chokmah to Keter, and then back to the Absolute. We're simplifying it, but basically that's the path. So the work to create our internal universe begins with Malkut, the physical world, that is to say, with our human organism, the so-called three-story factory mentioned by Gurdjieff, Ouspensky, and Maurice Nicole. the first phase of the creative aspect of the work is to create and sustain the solar bodies or superior existential bodies of the being, which can be understood as moving from Tiferet, from Malkut, up to Tiferet. We go from the physical world to the etheric world, to the astral world, to the mental world, to the causal world. So that's specifically what we're going to be looking at in this class. Since we already have the physical body, the etheric body, then we need to learn how to work properly with the cubic stone of Yesod, the philosophical stone, so that we can acquire first the solar astral body, second the solar mental body, and third the solar causal body. We must acquire these vehicles before we're able to pass on to the next phase of the work. So we now submit to you that building these solar bodies corresponds to the first 3 degrees of Hermetic Masonry. The work to acquire the solar astral is apprentice. The work to acquire the solar mental is companion, or sometimes it's called the fellow craft, the 2nd degree. And the work to acquire the solar causal body is master, the 3rd degree. So we're talking about 1, 2, 3. Moving from Yesod to Hod, from Hod to Netzach, from Netzach to Tiferet. Samael Ewan Veor says in his book, The 3 Mountains, it's one thing to be a master, and another, certainly much different, to achieve perfection in mastery. So it's one thing to reach the Tiferet and to become what's called a master, because there's a certain level of mastery in order to get there. But it's another thing to be a perfect master. We have to learn to work with the fire and the water, the sun and the moon, the mercury and the sulfur, in order to acquire these degrees. And these symbols refer to the practical work of alchemy. Right? We've already touched on these subjects when we studied Gnostic Tarot and Kabbalah. And so now we're going to talk about it more and focus on specifically the references that are made to this work with moving from the physical etheric human being that we are, right? We have a physical body, we have an etheric body, we have energy related with the etheric body, our vital body, Yesod. But acquiring our solar astral, solar mental, and solar causal bodies. So that's basically what the class is about. This next section is how to understand this initiatic work, this process of interiorization, the process of knowing ourselves, because we have to understand who and what we are, where we start from. Got some comments. Wish to learn and receive. Kabbalah, hello. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. And now we're going to switch into a different zone, a different mode. You know, sometimes we talk, sometimes we meditate. We're going to listen to some music just for a little bit here. Let's see what it's going to do to our emotional center. So we ask you in these moments to remember yourself, to bring yourself here to the present moment, and to direct your attention to your interior, to the interior of your physical organism. Some very interesting aspects of the esoteric teachings can be discovered in famous literature and music from various cultures and time periods. In the ancient mysteries, drama was used to convey information to the three brains: the intellectual brain, emotional brain, should say, and action brain of the initiates. We recommend that you listen to, watch, or go see 2 excellent operas that will certainly help you to understand initiatic symbolism: The Magic Flute of Mozart and Wagner's Parsival. So we're just going to listen to the first beginning part now, and I got to flip on some switches here to make it work, of Mozart's Magic Flute. We're going to stop it there. It keeps going. We're just going to stop there. Pause for a moment. So it's important for us to observe the emotional center. This type of music can assist us to have an experience in the emotional center related with what's called superior emotion. This next one, Parsival is by Richard Wagner. Just the beginning part we're going to listen to again. We're not going to go into the whole thing. But it's different, right? It's different from modern music. And these gentlemen were initiates. Clearly, they knew something about something. They knew something about esotericism. And if you study Mozart's Magic Flute, if you see it, you can probably find it on YouTube. You'll find that it's about a candidate and his initiatic process. So we encourage you to do that. We'll see also Parsival talks about the same thing. So let's listen now to Parsival's, the Wagner's overture from the opera Parsival. We'll stop it there. Like I said, it goes on, and the music is very beautiful. Has a different flavor. It's actually about the Knights of the Round Table and the legend of the Holy Grail. Richard Wagner, the German composer, wrote the opera where we can find very deep esoteric symbolism related to the themes of the Knights of the Round Table and the Holy Grail. It was based on a 13th century German book, Parsival, which is based on an unfinished 12th century French romance, Parsival, the Count of the Grail. Master Samael Enveyor wrote a book called Parsival Unveiled in 1970, wherein he describes the mysteries hidden in Wagner's great opera. So we're going to look at that. The quote from there, it says, "Now let us with great prudence, unveil Parsival, the culminating work of Wagner. May the gods assist us. The muses know very well that among the Wagnerian dramas, this diamatine work of the great master is something special and exceptional. In this opera, the verb of the master delectably flows as a golden river under the thick jungle of the sun. It is evident by all means and with complete meridian clarity that Wagner was a great initiate, an insightful esotericist, an authentic, illuminated one. Science, philosophy, art, and religion exist within Wagner's Parsival. A new Dr. Faust was endowed in this great musician. It seems that he had scrutinized very ancient religious scriptures. What is most astonishing to me is something tremendous. I am emphatically referring to innate magic. Where did he get it? Who taught it to him? In which school did he learn it? Next, the development of this drama comes with a deep, traditional magism, major mysteries that are not understood by the vulgar. To penetrate within this archaic occultism, to delve within the Christic mysteries, to examine the esoteric Buddhism contained within this Wagnerian gospel is precisely what we attempt in this book. Obviously, many pseudo-esotericists will become scandalized with our revelations. It is unquestionable that many sincerely mistaken ones, filled with good intentions, while rending their vestitures with indignation, will utter horrible things against us, the Gnostics. Indeed, this is because Parsival always provokes tremendous discussions. It is obvious that the children of the darkness abhor the light. Let us remember that Parsival was shown in the best theaters of Europe on January 1st, 1914. This invites us to meditate. The year 1914 will always be a memorable date among the remarkable dates of this humanity, because of the explosion of the First World War and the simultaneous debut of Parsival in all the civilized world. It is unquestionable that if Wagner would not have prohibited the presentation of his magnus opus outside of Bayreuth, then the world would have known it before 1914. Fortunately, and for the sake of the great work of the Father, the willpower of this immortal musician could not be fulfilled, because the international treaties related to copyrights were above it. Ostensibly in Germany, the legal protection of this type of works concludes 30 years after the death of its author. Since the already mentioned 30 years were accomplished on January 1st, 1914, the copyright of Parsival was nullified, and since then, the world could know this majestic work. 1914 had a mysterious connubiality, Parsival and the First World War. It is indubitable that the Wagnerian gospel resounds in the fields of battle. It is catastrophic, terrific. It gloriously shines amidst the tempest of all exclusiveness. Those from the first chapter. So that we have a question here. I tried to respond to it on Facebook, but it won't let me reply. And it also told me that they may have detected copywritten music. So we'll see what happens with the recording. It didn't seem to say anything on YouTube, because we're also simultaneously broadcasting on YouTube. The question is, does the tone from different types of music affect the brain or the mind? I've heard that before, that it does. According to Gnosis, it affects the heart, actually. That's what it affects. The emotional center. Music is related with the emotional center. So it's not just the mind, but really the heart. All right, we'll keep going with our quotation, with our introductory remarks. This is the scene of Parsival. There's a round table there. An altar in the middle, 3 steps. There's cups all around. The sacred scriptures state, "Ask, and it shall be given to you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you." It is written with burning coals in the book of all mysteries that the Lanu, or disciple, must question if the intimate self-realization is what one truly longs for with all the force of one's soul. So we need to question, we need to ask, right? We can't just accept what others say. We have to decide for ourselves. And that leads us down certain paths. The divine ones and the humans know very well that Parsival, as a chela, or disciple, did not become the king of the Grail because he did not ask for an explanation regarding the reason for Amfortas agony. Okay, so now he's giving his partial explanation. I mean, his whole book is an explanation of it, but we are just quoting this part because it's related with the 3 degrees that we'll see below. But as a disciple, or chila, or lanu, which are all names for the same thing, he did not ask for an explanation. The bread and the wine of the transubstantiation are distributed on the sacred tables. The brethren seat themselves at the feast. Parsival, however, remains standing in a state of mystical ecstasy. Finally, his delectable and ineffable exaltation ceases upon hearing Amfortas' cries of agony. Gurnemans, the ancient Hierophant, believes Parsival is unconscious and even pitiless to what is happening. Therefore, he comes up to him with a severe attitude and pushes him out of the sacred precinct. In very seriously judging the brilliant theme of this royal Wagnerian drama, glorious as no other, we can discover, not without a certain mystical amazement, the 3 esoteric classic degrees: apprentices, companions or fellows, and masters. The adolescent from the first part of the drama does not know anything about the mansion of delights and the corner of love with its dangerously blossoming lovely women. Nor does he know anything about Kundry, Herodias, Gundrigia, the exquisitely sinful one. He is still the apprentice of occult masonry. The Parsival of the second part is the man who courageously descends into the 9th Dantesque circle. He is the aspirant who works in the flaming forge of Vulcan, the companion. The hero of the third part is the master, who returns to the temple after having suffered too much. The boy of the first part does not even have his consciousness awakened. He's just one of those many pilgrims who travel very secretly throughout the obscure jungles of life, in search of a compassionate traveler who can have among his treasures a precious balm in order to heal his painful heart. The joy is very great when he finds on his suffering path the ancient hermit Gurnemans, who serves him as guide or guru. The Parsival of the second part is the ascetic who consciously descends into the infernal worlds. He is the man who works in the forge of the Cyclops, the mystic who defeats the 7 priestesses of temptation. The devotee from the third part is the adept, dressed with the wedding garment of the soul, the marvelous synthesis of the solar bodies. Within which is contained superior emotion, authentic mind, and conscious willpower. The triumphant return into the temple of the Grail is the principal characteristic of the Parsival from the third part. The anchorite returns into the sacred precinct, grasping with his dexterous hand the formidable holy pike, the blessed spear. That's a graphic depicting that aspect. He's got a cup also and the dove, right? So it's got some very interesting symbolism. So again, we recommend that you watch that drama, Parsival, as well as Mozart's Magic Flute. So now let's get into the second part, combinations of Arcana. That what we just did was the introduction. So now we're going to jump into the second part. We got another question. Does energy, motion, or emotion, energy, emotion, all parts like the heart, mind, brain, soul? So does it, the question is, does I think it's referring to the other answer, does emotion affect all parts like the brain, heart, and soul? I think that's a question that we can answer through self-study. I think we have to decide that for ourselves. Does feeling come from the heart, brain? Well, in Gnostic psychology, we talk about feeling related with the emotional center, and that the emotional center is connected with the heart. So not sure if you're referring to that as the brain, the emotional brain. But we have different plexuses, right? We have the intellectual plexus, the emotional plexus, and the action plexus, or the emotional or intellectual brain, emotional brain, and action brain. Okay. So now we've seen that the purpose is to understand these three stages or degrees and what they are and what that means for us. So that's going to bring us back to the last two letters, Shin and Tav, of the system, the Kabbalistic, Gnostic Kabbalistic system that we've been studying. So this is combinations of Arcana number 1 and the work of the initiate. The symbolism of the S and the T in Gnostic Esotericism. When we speak sweetly in the very pure divine language, which as a river of gold runs under the dense jungle of the sun, then it is impossible for us to forget the magical S that resounds within the shade like a sweet and affable whistle. This is the subtle voice, the one which Elias heard in the wilderness. Apollonius of Tyana wrapped himself with his famous wool mantle in order to beg to the holy gods, asking them for the enigmatic sound. The mystical note, the magical S, conferred upon the old Hierophant the power of consciously projecting himself with his astral body. Indeed, the S has a certain similitude with the Hebraic letter Tzadi, while the triform Greek sigma is related with the S and with the Hebrew letters Shin and Samek, the 21st and the 15th. The latter means sustain and has the numerological value of 60. It has been stated to us, which is known by any Kabbalist, that Shin has a value of 300 and signifies tooth. The addition of these two letters, Shin and Samek, is therefore equivalent to 360. The 360 degrees of the circle and to the sidereal days of the solar year. However, we, the Gnostics, must go much further beyond all this. We must inquire, scrutinize, search, and discover the intimate existing relationship between the serpent and the cross. The S, the serpent, and the T, the cross, are the esoteric symbols that profoundly complement each other. The S is simultaneously a Jehovistic and Vedantine truth. It is the serpentine power or mystic fire, the primordial energy or Shakti potential, which lies dormant within the magnetic center of the coccygeal bone. So we should understand what he's talking about if we've studied Tarot and Kabbalah. The Sanskrit name of such a magnetic center is Muladhara chakra, right? The Church of Ephesus. The Kundalini is the pristine force of the universe, the electronic occult power which underlies all organic and inorganic matter. The sexual connection of the phallus with the uterus forms a cross. The Kundalini, the magic S, the snake, is found intimately related with that cross or Tau. The serpentine fire awakens within the power of the Holy Cross. This is ostensible. In the Hebrew, Tau or Tav has precisely the marvelous significance of cross. It ends as the 22nd letter of that alphabet and with the numeric value of 400. The esoteric relationship between the S and the T. If we reflect seriously on the intimate existing relationship between the S and the Tau, cross, or T, then we arrive at the logical conclusion that only by means of the Sahaja Maithuna, sexual magic, can the creative snake be awakened. The clue, the secret, has been published in almost all of Samael and Veor's former books. It consists of not ever spilling the cup of Hermes during the sexual trance. The key is the connection of the lingam yoni, phallus uterus, without ever ejaculating the eins seminis, the entity of the semen, or having orgasm, because within the aforementioned substance is found latent the whole eins virtutis of the fire. Eins virtutis means the entity of virtue. Iao, I-A-O, is the fundamental mantra of the Sahaja Maithuna. Chant each letter separately in the laboratorium oratorium of the third logos during sacred copulation. The sexual transmutation of the eins seminis into creative energy is a legitimate axiom of Hermetic wisdom. The bipolarization of this type of cosmic energy in the human organism was analyzed ever since ancient times in the initiatic colleges of Egypt, Mexico, Greece, India, etc. The ascension of the seminal energy to the brain is performed thanks to a certain pair of nervous cords that, in the form of an 8, splendidly unfold to the right and the left of the dorsal spine. We now have arrived at the caduceus of Mercury, with its wings of the spirit that are always opened. These pair of mentioned nervous cords can never be found with the scalpel, because they are rather of an ethereal, tetradimensional nature, right? Related with the fourth dimension. These are the two witnesses of the apocalypse, the two olive trees, and the two candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. And if any man will hurt them, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours their enemies. That's I think it's from Revelations. It's a Bible quote. In the sacred land of the Vedas, these pair of nervous cords are known with the Sanskrit names of Ida and Pingala. The ascent of the sacred fire through the spinal column from vertebra to vertebra, from degree to degree, is frightfully slow. It is ostensible that the 33 degrees of occult masonry, which belong to those such as Ragon or Ledbetter, correspond with the total sum of these 33 spinal vertebra. When the alchemist commits the crime of spilling the cup of Hermes, referring to the ejaculation of the Einseminis or to the orgasm, one obviously loses esoteric degrees because the Kundalini goes down, descending one or more vertebra in accordance with the magnitude of the fault. Oh, we're having a little problem. Looks like we went offline. Hopefully it went back online now. Sorry about that. Should be back online. Thanks for your patience. All right, we'll get back into it. So we just read from Samael and Veor's book. Now we're going to look at the other authors here. We're going to look at Eliphas Levi and Viracocha, what they have to say about these letters, Shin and Tav, and the relationship with the mysteries of the cross. In the Sefer Yetzirah, which is a Hebraic Kabbalistic book, it says that the three mother letters are Aleph, Mem, and Shin, which correspond to air. Aleph is air, Mem is water, and Shin is fire. In the chapter 3, verse 4 of that book, it says three mothers are Aleph, Mem, and Shin. In the universe are air, water, and fire. The heavens and heat are created from fire. The earth and cold are created from water, and the temperate air from breath maintains balance between them. Breath maintains balance between the fire and the water. However, Eliphas Levi says that the mother letters can also be Aleph, Mem, and Tav, since Shin and Tav are two contrary and analogous letters which represent being and life. So let's try to understand this further, because remember, Shin is fire. We want to understand how to work with the fire, how to dominate the fire. And Tav is the cross. It is the return to divinity. So if we understand these two together, that can assist us with our goal. We know that Shin plays a role in the Tetragrammaton of Jesus, Yeshua, or Jehoshua. So Tetragrammaton means 4 letters. The Pentagrammaton is 5 letters. If we take Yod, He, Vav, He, and we add a Shin in the middle, then we have a 5-lettered word. We talked about this in Arcanum 21, and it's specifically mentioned in the notes. And Eliphas Levi says further that Shin must enter into Jehovah in order to become the life of Jehoshua. And he describes Shin as the letter of the polarized fire, and that Jesus in Luke 12:49 says, I have come to cast fire upon the earth, and how I wish it was already kindled. When Jesus was crucified, there was a sign above him that had 4 letters, INRI, INRI, which esoterically signifies Ignis Natura Renovatur Integram, meaning the fire renews nature incessantly. This fire that exists in nature is the sexual impulse. The sexual impulse in the human being, and it is represented by the Hebrew letter Shin, which, as we mentioned, has these different tarot cards. We must dominate the fire, the force, in order to not be a lunatic or fool who becomes a victim of the sexual impulse. And this is why Arcanum 21 is called Transmutation in the Gnostic Egyptian tarot deck. In most decks, it's called the Fool or the Lunatic. In French, le fou, which means like a crazy person. Because if we don't transmute the energy, if we don't dominate that energy, we become a crazy person. Viracocha tells us that herein lies the great confusion for the Kabbalists, since in card 21 of the Hebrews, it represents the lunatic, and is only numbered in the Aryo-Egyptian deck with a 0. The significance of the card is errors of the past. It is not called the lunatic in the Nordic tradition, but the chaste innocent, from Richard Wagner's opera Parsival. So you see why it's important to understand the chaste innocent from Richard Wagner's Parsival, why we referred to that at the beginning. So again, we see that the key to understanding the symbol related with Shin, the S, the S sound of the snake, is related with chastity or sexual purity. This further explains why Levi says the rehabilitation of Shin is the history of redemption, and explains to us the folly of the cross, which refers to 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 18 that says, "For the preaching of the cross is foolishness to those who perish, but unto us who are saved it is the power of God." And he had this graphic here, which is like a Shin, right? Because it's sort of like a W, but in the center is a cross. Those who understand transmutation, or those who consider transmutation to be foolishness or lunacy will perish because they do not save themselves, right? They're not going to acquire the first, second, or third degree, because they're not going to transmute the creative energy in order to do that creation. The power of God is found in the cross through the rehabilitation of the sexual fire, Shin. Related with this, Levi quotes St. Augustine, saying, "We are the authors of our own destiny, but God does not save us without our help." That is, we need to help the divinity by doing our part. And this brings us back to Tav, Arcanum 22. Levi says that this letter is the hierogram of the cross, and that the cross, the ancient Tav of the Hebrews, or the X of our alphabet, has been adopted in mathematics as the sign of the unknown, the mystery of mysteries, the force of forces, the light of lights, the glory of glories. And in some of his writings, he gives these symbols. And if we study the ancient Semitic letters, we find two interesting things. Number one, the letter Shin almost always has 3 points, similar to a W or an E or a 3 on their sides. And that the letter Tav very often has an intersection of 2 or more lines, forming some kind of a cross, like a T or an X or a plus. Understand now that Tav was the cross for the ancient Kabbalists. The final letter of their alphabet, similar to the Omega of the Greeks. And this is why Arcanum 22 is also called the crown of life, since it represents the supreme sacrifice whereby one is able to incarnate the divinity. All right, just looking for any relevant questions or comments. The Tetragrammaton and the Kabbalistic significance of the cross. Here we are in the heart of the High Kabbalah and the Masonic sign of the cross, which is the key of all the synthetic signs of magic. It now appears to us explained and applied to the dogma of the universal analogy of the letters of the divine quaternary, Yod He Vav He, but this must be clarified. The name that the Hebrews gave to God was, they said, incommunicable. It was the expression of the absolute. The great priest alone knew the true sense and had the true pronunciation. And it was said among the people that this four-lettered name, Yod-He-Vav-He, was the key of heaven and of hell, the great arcanum of magic, and the principle of miracles. Now this name, which is indeed the cornerstone of the universal temple, had analogy as its rule and progress as its objective. I'll tell you right now, this sounds like Alphonse Levy. Let's see who it is. Yeah. Yep. He's got a very special way of speaking, of writing. In fact, this four-lettered name is composed of the Yod, which in traditional or Kabbalistic hieroglyphics represents the phallus, or masculine creative organ, the He, representing the sitis, or female generative organ, and the Vav, equivalent to the lingam, or the harmonious union of the previous two. These are the three original first letters of the divine name, containing the complete idea of the Trinity of all religions. Then the He is repeated in order to complete the quaternary in such a way that the first hieroglyphic meaning of the word is this: nature results from the first active principle, from the first passive principle, and from their harmonic union. As can be seen, the divine personification certainly relates to the first letter Yod, also related to the tribe of Judah. The Kabbalists often also write the divine Tetragrammaton with 3 Yods and a Kametz, arranged as a cross within a circle. And one can already glimpse here into the explanation of the Kabbalistic sign of the cross, which ends the dogmatic prayer of the Christian initiator, the Pater Noster, the Lord's Prayer. Now he's writing in French, so when he says dogmatic, he means it in a way like it's part of the dogma, integrated into the dogma. But he's saying here that there's a cross, right? It's written in the shape of a cross with a circle. It is the mystery of generation that the ancients sought for the revelation of the creative principle. They had found rigor and active strength or force, symbolized by Yod, softness and passive gentleness, symbolized by He, harmony, pleasure, and fertility through the analogical union of the two opposites, symbolized by Vav. Then, by observing in nature the universal reign of contrasts, day and night, spring and winter, good and evil, they defined God, or the supreme ideal, by the power of good subjugating evil in an eternal agreement with the supreme reason that keeps universal equilibrium. Also, the name of Jehovah, spelled and pronounced Yod-He-Vav-He, signifies the 4 cardinal points with their zodiacal oppositions. By pronouncing it Yod-Chava or Yod-Heva, it signifies the father of life, the progenitor of the mother. Pronounced Yahuvehu, it signifies the essence of the future, or he who will be what he is and who will be because he is. So the Kabbalists, following Hermes' universal dogma of analogies, take the name of Jehovah as the prototype of all that is, and all that can be. Tracing it thus, they enclose this philosophical cross within a circle. The most skilled rabbis do not mistake themselves regarding the work of the great religious revolutionary. One reads in the Sefer Toldos Jetchut, a Kabbalistic anti-Christian book, that Jetchut, or Jesus, stealthily entered into the Holy of Holies and stole the true character of the Tetragrammaton and hid them in his thigh, in his yod, or generative organ. And it was by this means that all the miracles were possible for him, since he deposited therein the secret of all revelations. Those who do not find the proofs have only to fully read, or rather to decipher, the book of Revelations with the help of the keys of the Kabbalah. All right, well, we're going to keep going. This is the second part. Please, if you have questions or comments, let us know. The Gnostics, Christian Kabbalah, and the cross of initiation. In genuine Christianism, the name Gnostics was used to designate a class of Christians privileged to a science and to a very special intelligent understanding in both the dogmas as well as in the mysteries. Their dogmas have been formulated for centuries through faith, under the control of science and reason, and can change their appearance, but are basically always the same. These doctrines are essentially a science recognizing its origin and its existence. This science, the Kabbalah, is rigorous like numbers and poetic like nature. The primitive church was very hierarchical, and its hierarchy corresponded to the three stations recognized in human progress. These were the stations corresponding to the successive and progressive development of the three elective terms of the human soul: sensibility, willpower, and love. In order to will something well, one must know it well. In order to know something well, one must sense it well. Human beings of willpower and of love were therefore those who knew best, and for this reason they were called Gnostics. But each degree of the hierarchy had its formulas, and in fact the same words do not have the same meaning for all. Everyone comprehends according to their degree of intelligent understanding, and such a dogma, which presents an illuminated sense to the true Gnostic, is perfectly obscure for an intelligence from an inferior degree. It is for this reason that Christ always spoke to the crowd in parables, and then exclaimed, "Those who have ears to hear, let them hear." To say the absolute truth to those who can only hear a relative truth is misleading, and in some way lying to them, because one can be certain that they will give to your teaching, misunderstood by them, any meaning within their reach, but it will necessarily be monstrous and absurd. Such was the crime, or at least the error, of the false Gnostics or Gnostic profaners, who, in speaking of the poorly understood principle of equality between the brothers, wanted to popularize Gnosis or the dogmas of the Kabbalah. We have said that primitive Christianism had its source in the High Kabbalah. The system of parables employed by the Savior so as to form a new dogmatic esotericism, and the entire Gospel of John and his Revelation or Apocalypse, written entirely in hieroglyphic figures, only familiar to the initiates or the Kabbalah, or the initiates of the Kabbalah, are sufficient proof of this. Now let us examine those figures. Right, Levi? He's nice with his verb. Remember that Tav was the cross for the ancient Kabbalists. And we have seen that Tav is related to the Tetragrammaton, because 22 equals 2 plus 2 equals 4. 4 is the four-lettered name. And the Tetragrammaton can be arranged in the form of a cross. So let's now look a little deeper into the symbolism of the cross and its traditional or Kabbalistic hieroglyphic associations. Alphonse Lévy says that the insertion of the vertical phallus into the horizontal sitis forms the stauros of the Gnostics, or the philosophical cross of the Masons. Samael Veor goes even further, explaining to us that the insertion of the phallus inside the sitis forms a cross, the cross of initiation, that we must take upon our shoulders. We studied that in Arcanum 4. And he says that the root of all white and black doctrines is in sex. Christ has his plan of action. Javeh has his. The chosen follow Christ. The majority fanatically follow Javeh. Nevertheless, all of them hide behind the cross. Let's recall the statue of Christos, or Harpocrates, synthesized as a rooster whose beak is converted into a phallus. This is found in the Vatican in Rome. At the foot of this statue, there is a sign in Greek that says Soter Kosmou, meaning this is the Savior of the world. That's in the Vatican. Regarding this statue, Huiracocha says, when we receive initiation, when we realize the importance of this symbol, when we receive initiation, then we realize the importance of this symbol and that the truth par excellence is enclosed in it. We just have a little bit more to cover. Thanks for hanging in there. I know it's a lot of material. The Rose Cross and the Temple of Jerusalem. In regards to the cross, Levi says that at the center of the cross blooms the mystical rose, the rose of light, the flower of life and of love, whose petals are arranged with order and represent the hearts of the elect in their harmonious hierarchy. The rose is the symbol of the great work. The great work has been realized when the rose of the Spirit blooms upon the cross of our body. The physical, etheric, astral, and mental are the four bodies of sin. The physical, etheric, astral, and mental are the four bodies of sin. These also form the temple, or the abode of our spirit, the innermost, the intimus, or inner being. The mental and astral bodies are the two columns of Masonic temples, Jachin and Boaz, which have their foundation in the cubic stone of Yesod, the etheric or vital body. During the time of the Pharisees, had not the Jews lost the science of the cornerstone, the cubic stone, the philosophical stone, in a word, the fundamental stone of the Kabbalistic temple? One can comprehend, then, that genuine Christianism, far from being a Jewish heresy, was the true Orthodox tradition of Judaism, and that only the scribes and the Pharisees were the sectarians. The Sephirah Yesod is the philosophical stone of the alchemists, the cubic stone, the mysterious Amphorasep stone of the Hebrews, and is found within the sexual organs. Jesus says to Matthew in chapter 16, verse 18, "Thou art Peter, Petros, and upon this rock or stone, Petros, I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." Peter, Patar, the illuminator, is the master of sexual magic, the generous master who always awaits us at the entrance of the terrible path. Peter's original name is Patar, with its three consonants, PTR, which are radical. P comes to remind us of the Father who is in secret, the Latin pater, our fathers, or fitaras. T, the Tau or Tav, the divine hermaphrodite, the man and the woman sexually united. And R is a vital letter in Inri. It is the sacred and terribly divine fire, the Egyptian Ra. Peter's doctrine is the Mithuna, and the key of the Mithuna is that the couple should withdraw from the sexual act before reaching the spasm. Restrained desire will transmute the seminal liquid into creative energy. The sexual energy ascends up to the cerebrum. This is how the cerebrum is semenized and how the semen becomes cerebrized. And keep in mind that in Gnosis, both men and women have that seed, that semen, not just in the male. It is the source of those hormones. It is we could say, an etheric substance. It also has its physical aspect, but we work with that etheric energy when we transmute the creative energy. The Maithuna is the exercise that permits us to awaken and develop the Kundalini, the igneous serpent of our magical powers. When the Kundalini awakens, it ascends along the medullar canal of the spinal column. The Kundalini opens the 7 churches of the Apocalypse of St. John, which are situated along the spinal column. No one can incarnate the intimate Christ without previously having built the temple upon the living rock or cubic stone, sex, Peter, Patar. We must raise the 7 columns of the temple of wisdom. The word Inri is written with fiery characters upon each one of the 7 columns of the temple. The fire's 7 degrees of the power are only developed through sexual transmutation, sexual magic. Realization is, then, the essence of the Christian doctrine. The entire Christian revelation is contained in this phrase: the verb is made flesh. This means that faith, which proves itself through works, can now replace hypotheses, or we could say can even replace blind faith, that lead to nothing but fables. Now magic is transformed into sanctity. Wonders became miracles, and the multitudes, previously excluded by ancient initiation, are called to the royalty and priesthood of virtue. The plan of all great allegorical temples throughout antiquity is founded upon the multiplication of the cube by the cross. The first around which a circle can be described, and then the cubic cross that can move in a globe or a sphere. These notions, which are rendered more intelligible by a diagram, have been handed down to our own days in Masonic initiations, and they are a perfect justification for the name attributed to the modern society, right? Because a Mason is someone who works with the stone, a builder who works with the stone. And they are a perfect justification for the name attributed to the modern society in question, for they are also the fundamental principles of architecture and the science of building. So here is a smaller diagram of this philosophical cross that was mentioned. Here's a bigger diagram. We looked at it the other day at the end of our Tarot and Kabbalah studies. Now you can see the Inri emphasized there. Here it has more attributes related with the months. Their Egyptian name, Jewish name, constellation. The point, I think this is the last section. Let's see. Yeah. The point of support, death, and the work of the initiate. Archimedes said, "Give me a point of support, and I will move the universe." Archimedes searched for the lever to move the universe. This lever exists. Alphonse Levy says that this lever is the astral light. The astral light is the sacred fire of the Holy Spirit, the light of the Logos, whose nature and divine powers are like living and conscious electricity, but not the same as physical electricity. When a person is impelled by their conscious spiritual willpower, they awaken the sacred fire of the Holy Spirit, which, as a coiled serpent, abides in every person within the coccygeal ganglion, the coccyx, right, the base of the spine, and excites this fire and impels it into activity. then this fire will convert itself into the agent for the work of telesis, or the intelligent work of the perfection within the initiate. The initiate's reward is the liberation from the wheel of returns and union with God. But they have to have previously substituted their mortal physical body with the immortal solar body, the body of gold, the to soma heliakon, named in this way because it is as resplendent as the sun. And their soul is betrothed with their spirit, the innermost, intimus, or inner being. The astral light, the lever of Archimedes, is the Kundalini. Whosoever develops the Kundalini can place their body of flesh and bone into the fourth dimension and transport themselves to distant Thule, the land of the gods. Whosoever knows how to pray and ask Mother Kundalini could well beg her to put them into the fourth dimension and transport them to the sacred island. Kundalini is the lever with which we can place ourselves in the fourth dimension with our physical bodies. The invention of the lever immediately differentiated primitive man from the animal, and in fact was linked with the real appearance of concepts. In reality, we can be sure that the beings living on the earth are divided into two groups, those who know the action of the lever and those who do not. We need the lever of Archimedes, the super-astral serpent, in order to put ourselves into the fourth dimension and transport ourselves with our body to the land of the gods. The hour has arrived to liberate the mind and awaken the Kundalini. When we finish with all of our sins, then the I, the ego, is dissolved. Then we incarnate the soul and the spirit. Indeed, this is how we become human beings in the most complete sense of the word. If we have not eliminated the I or ego, then the only thing that continues after death is the I or ego, the legion, our legion of I's. The ego or I returns in order to satisfy its desires. Death is, then, the return to conception. This is the wheel of Arcanum 10. Those who still have not dissolved the I or ego, and who have neither incarnated the soul nor the spirit, live within the internal worlds with their consciousness asleep. They only have a subjective consciousness and a subjective perception. On the other hand, after death of the physical body of a true human being who has the soul and the spirit incarnated, that person lives completely awakened in their astral body, in their solar astral body. They enjoy the internal worlds of consciousness and enjoy objective perception. If one studies the Egyptian Book of the Dead, one sees that it is Isis who is called to put the ego to death. Without the Divine Mother, the death of the ego is impossible. With the death of the ego, the essence is freed, it is liberated, and becomes lost in Osiris, the divine Christ. We have to die in order to free ourselves from the tragic wheel of samsara, as it's called in Buddhism. Therefore, whosoever wants to liberate themselves from this wheel has to dissolve the I and incarnate their soul. This work is very difficult, and those who achieve it are rare. Indeed, the kingdom of Malkut is a terrible filter. The waste from this filter is what is normal in our times, and is swallowed up by the abyss. The gold, the chosen one, the true human being, the angel, is Malkut's conception. So we're going to stop there. Appreciate you guys hanging in there with us. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment area. Next week, we'll jump into combination of Arcana 2. Oh, we do have a question. The question is, why is Samael and Veor so infatuated with sex, so fixated with magical sex? That's all I read about. Well, through sex, that is through harnessing the power of nature, which is part of what we are trying to analyze today with the analysis of the Shin and Tav, the S and the T, we can learn how to become a creative being that's in harmony with the universe. So we could say that the mysteries of nature are synthesized in that fight for survival. So you could say survival of the fittest, but the struggle for survival. And that struggle is related with progress or progression, which is related with our energy, our particular energy, and our ability to progress. And if we analyze traditional medicine, we find that the root of our health is in our sexual energy. The whole purpose of our human organism is for us to be able to perpetuate the human race, right? For us to be able to create another. If we leverage that, if we use the lever of Archimedes, right? If we learn that is the sort of driving force within us, and we use it to connect with divinity, to connect with the source of that energy, the creator of the creative energy, then we can do something completely different. It's almost like giving a gift back to God. If God gave us that creative energy, God gave us existence, which is synthesized in the creative energy. And we take that creative energy and we don't waste it, we leverage it in ourselves. Then we can reconnect with God. But right now, if these are just words, then we recommend you do some transmutation exercises. We recommend that you practice that. The specific practice that he gives is to connect, for husband and wife to connect and disconnect without the spasm. When we have the orgasm, the spasm, we lose the energy. The charge that we got from connecting those two different poles of the magnet of man and woman, that charges up inside of us, which is why we have those interesting sensations, those, we could say, electrical or whatever you want to call them, when we're connected in the sexual act. If we withdraw before mechanical nature takes over, and we keep that energy within us, then we steal the fire from the devil, so to speak. We steal that energy. We keep that energy. And then we have interesting mystical experiences without ejaculation, without orgasm at all. We withdraw before the orgasm. That's correct. And we keep that energy inside of us. And then we feel different. And we can have mystical experiences. The whole purpose is, if that energy can create a physical life in the external world, can it not create a spiritual life in the internal worlds? This is the concept, that through transmutation, through not wasting energy, through having sex but withdrawing before the orgasm, we dominate the energy and we start to create something within us, which is verifiable, experimentally verifiable by each and every human being. It is something that you have to do for yourself to verify it. You should not take my word for it or anybody else's. You have to do it. Then you see, it's been a week now. It's been 2 weeks now. Do I feel different? Is something different? Do I have different faculties? What if I did it for a year? What if I did it for 20 years? This is the system. Exactly. Fiat lux. Exactly. We have to make light, create light within ourselves. And that's the process, by eliminating the ego and transmuting that energy, harnessing that creative energy. We got, thank you. Is this lecture available to listen at another time? Yes, it will be. It's also on YouTube. The animal and plant kingdom do not get misled that way like the human race. The animal and plant kingdoms, they're victims of nature, right? They work through nature, but we have the ability to be kings and queens of nature. And that's what we're talking about. Learning how to dominate nature. Well, all right. We've taken plenty of your time. Thank you for listening. And we want to invite you to next week's class. We're going to study combination of Arcana 2. Today we're just sort of talking again about what we talked about at the end of Tarot and Kabbalah, but adding on some other flavors, some other things. So we're going to go into it now. We're going to get deeper. So if you like this, then we think you'll like that too. Again, thank you for your time, and we look forward to talking to you again next week.